So, good evening. I hope good evening. I hope everyone can hear me so that we can begin this webinar. So I will be sharing my screen as we move on. And also, if you have any questions, you can use the chat function on Zoom, and therefore we can go on. Okay, so welcome once again. This is the webinar on formulas and shortcuts hosted by Investia Africa Limited. So this webinar is for January of 2020. As the year goes on, we will have a webinar every month based on topics suggested by the attendees. So today's webinar is on formulas and shortcuts. So we can move ahead. So at the end of this session, we expect to have, or rather look at three main things. So that is one, you learn how to take advantage of some Excel inbuilt functions. Two, we learn about Excel shortcuts and data manipulation tools. And three, we do a short introduction to macros and how to record them. Okay, so these are what we're going to go through today, and I can just start with a brief introduction to Investia. So Investia Africa Limited is a corporate and financial advisory firm which offers three main services. These are project and corporate finance advisory, financial modeling and training, and capital raising. As you can see, that's the map with our footprint. These are some of the clients that we've worked with so far. Pretty sure you can notice one or two, and now we can get into the FAST standard. So out of the services we offer, I have explained that we do financial modeling and training, and further to that, we use something called the FAST standard. Now, the FAST standard is to financial modeling what IFRS is to accounting. So this means that it is a standard that has rules and regulations on how people should come up with financial models. So the FAST is used all over the world, and these are some of the people, some of the companies that use FAST. And as you can see, Investia is the only African company that does use FAST or is certified to use FAST. So FAST is an acronym that stands for flexible, appropriate, structured, and transparent. It basically means that as we do our financial modeling and our financial modeling training, we adhere to these four main rules. But there are plenty more rules, and there's a whole standard or handbook that you can go through, and that you can get on www.fast-standard.org. Okay, with that, so my name is Jihan Haji. I will be your trainer for today. I have a background in finance, having done my BBA in finance. I'm also, I've completed my training in FAST financial modeling, and I am certified, and I'm currently pursuing an MBA. Okay, so with that introduction, we can get into our content for today. Okay. First thing that we're going to look at is Excel functions and formulas. So for functions and formulas, they're two different things. So we'll just get into that. So formula is basically an expression that you enter into a cell that relates other cells. So it's basically your equal sign, this cell plus this cell, or this number plus this some number, like what we have on the slide right now. A function, on the other hand, is a predefined formula that is already available in Excel. So it's basically a function will do the same thing as a formula, but because they're functions or they're formulas that are used worldwide, all across the world, Excel has already automated that and therefore put them in functions. And an example of a function is equal sign sum. So the thing with functions, you put them in brackets. That's why you see there two brackets right there. Then, so we can proceed. So today we'll focus more on the functions because formulas, that's something that is specific to the certain user. So for functions, basically what they do is, or what they're supposed to do in this case is increase your productivity, because you can't go in inputting a formula all the time for things that Excel can easily automate. So they're supposed to increase productivity, and is also very important when handling a mixture of data types. Because for formulas, it's mostly numbers. It's this plus this multiplied by that, numbers. But for functions, you can use many different data types. So today we'll look at a couple of functions. We'll concentrate on just a couple. They are plenty. There are so many, but we'll concentrate on a couple. And in this case, it's the VLOOKUP, the HLOOKUP, index, match, concatenate, and dated if. So that's what we'll do on formulas and functions. Then after that, we'll move on to shortcuts in Excel. So shortcuts in Excel mostly are keyboard shortcuts. You see, when working on Excel, we assume that a person mostly uses their keyboard, and therefore, when there are some things that you need to like reach to your mouse for, or reach to your mouse pad for, it becomes a bit maybe time consuming, maybe distracting you from what you're actually doing with your keyboard. So to cut off on that distraction, the time, you use shortcuts, and mostly keyboard shortcuts. So they're often faster than using a mouse, and that's because you can keep your hands on your keyboard. So the Microsoft application packages have common, they have common shortcuts that pan across, not just specific to Excel. So for those, they're the normal Control C for copy, Control V for paste, etc. So what we will look specifically at today is the shortcuts for Excel, and for that we can divide them into two. Those are the Control shortcuts and the Alt shortcuts. So we will get into that, and then also just as a way of also handling data on Excel, we will look at a couple of data manipulation tools, and for that we'll look at the watch window and the goal seek function. Yeah, and then finally, what we will do is do a brief introduction to macros. So this is macros, and try and record one as well. So macros, what it is that it's a programming code that runs in Excel to automate your routine tasks. So like we said, shortcuts, what they basically do is stop you from going to the mouse all the time. So what we're trying to do at the end of the day is save some time and also reduce distractions. So what macros will do is that if there are some automated things that you do specifically with the type of work that you do or the type of data that you have, you can easily automate that task rather than now going to the specific tab on the menu and clicking on something or the other, or highlighting, whatever it is, we can just automate it using macros. So basically what we do with macros is you record yourself doing it, and then you assign a shortcut key combination to it, and then after that, from then on, Excel will automatically pick it up once you put in your key combination. So for macros, you can record it simply on Excel, as we will do today, but there's also something that's called VBA. This is Visual Basic for Applications, which is a programming language that Excel uses to record your steps and perform the routine tasks. Now you can just do it the same way to record macros. Then if you think maybe recording it with Excel just normally is a bit too simple for you, then you can easily use VBA. And we will get further into that in the subsequent webinars for this year. So with that, I think now we can move into our Excel worksheet so that we cover the things that we have mentioned. So for that, allow me to open the Excel worksheet. So I'm just opening the Excel worksheet so that it is ready to share and you can see what I will be doing as we move on. Okay, so right now I have shared the Excel worksheet. I hope everyone can see. For those joining us, you can, if you have a question, you can use the chat function on Zoom, and from there I'll be able to see and address your question. Yes, so I think we can now all see the Excel function. And as you can see, the Excel workbook, and as you can see, it's been divided into two sheets. We have the formulas and functions and shortcuts and macros. So we'll start with the formulas and functions. And for that, we said that we're going to look at some specific functions. We're going to look at specific functions and then proceed from there. Okay, so first functions that we'll look at are the lookup functions. So what the lookup functions basically do is that they return a specific value based on a criteria from a given array. So for that, they're divided into two. We have the H lookup and the V lookup. So the first thing we'll look at is the H lookup, which in this case, as we've said, as all lookup functions, it gives data in a row of a table based on the criteria that you specify. Now, what's the difference between, say now, HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP, why they're divided is that some data moves horizontally on a table and other data would move vertically on a table. So for the two different types of data in tables, you use either the HLOOKUP or the VLOOKUP. Now, for the HLOOKUP, this is for data that will move horizontally on a table. And now for that, we'll use this example here. We have a company that has, so there's a table here that has sales in Kenya shillings and commission as percentages. And as you can see, how the data moves is that it goes horizontally on the table. So when we're trying to ask Excel to look something up for us in such type of a table, we will use the HLOOKUP function. Now, then down here we have a couple of salespeople and the sales that they made in a given period of time. And for that, we want to find what commission they're supposed to earn and the actual commission that they earned in Kenya shillings. So as you can see, the first one has already been done. So we'll just go through that and then do the formula or the function again for the subsequent ones. So for here, we're saying that Max, in this case, made sales of 89,197, and his commission is 12%. So this has been done using the HLOOKUP. Now, if we look at the table without getting to the formula first, we just want to see whether the formula is right? So we see that 89,000 on this table would fall between 75 and 100,000 Kenya shillings. And this would mean that the 89,000 is more than 75,000, but less than 100,000. Therefore, it has given us 12%. So for this, we need to note that when using the lookup functions, and you have now a range of data, as is right here, Excel will always assume that the data, the commission and the corresponding, say, sales in this case, that is, Excel will assume that that is the lower limit, so that anything above that but less than the next data set, they will give that commission. So important thing to note is that Excel assumes the data set or the range in the data set is the lower limit. So now with that, we can now get into the formula, or the function in this case. So to open a function on Excel, you press the F2 key. So that's what I'm going to do. And as you can see, it has opened the formula for me. So what we want to do is just look at the formula, the arguments in the formula, and then replicate that to the other ones. So once you come here to the formula bar, you can see when I press my cursor to the function, it has a pop down here that tells me what exactly is what argument corresponds with what the argument is and the name of the argument in this case, in the case of the function. So for each lookup, the first thing that we need to feed into Excel is the lookup value. In this case, we are trying to see, based on the sales made by this salesperson, what is the commission. So what we are looking up is the sales, and which you can see in the formula is H19, and H19 in this case is the sales made by Max. So the next thing now is the table array. Yes, we're looking up the sales, but we're looking up the sales from this specific table that we have that tells us what commission to give. So for that, we put in the table that we want Excel to look up the value from, or in this case, the table array. Now, you will note that the table array has some dollar signs before both the column and the row. Now, this is something we call anchoring. Anchoring in Excel is important, especially when you want to replicate a formula, either moving downwards or across, depending on the nature of your data set. Now, what will happen is that if we do this formula without anchoring it, means that for each and every salespeople, say there are almost like 20, we'll have to redo the formula over and over again. But when we anchor it, we just do it once and then copy down or copy across, depending. So in this case, because the table is situated in one place and it's the same table that we're going to look for all the salespeople, we have anchored both the column and the row. Means when a dollar sign is before the column, there's an anchor, there's a dollar sign. When the dollar sign is before the column, it's anchored. When it's before the row, it's anchored. So we've done that for the whole table array. So this is important for formulating, for copying the function, yes. Then the next thing now is the row index number. Now, for each lookup, when we have a table array, what we do is that we're telling Excel, look up this value, but eventually give me this value, right? So in this case, it's look up the sales and give me what commission I'm supposed to get. Now, what we need to know that in our table array, what we have highlighted, the first row 1 is the sales, and row 2 is the commission. So based on our arguments, what we're looking for is the commission. And therefore, the number that we've put there is 2. We're telling Excel, in my table array, look at the second column and look up the sales, and then give me what the commission is. So look up the first column, which is the sales, and give me what the commission is, which is second row, and therefore 2. Then the last thing that Excel asks for is how do you want it to match? Do you want it to be an exact match, or do you want it to be a range? So for this, it's either 0 or 1. And in this case, we want it to be an exact match. Therefore, we've put 1. And when you enter, you have your commission as stated. So what we're going to do is we're going to quickly input the same formula for K, in this case, the salesperson K, who's made 167,463 in sales, and see whether we'll get the right commission. So we'll do the same thing that we have in the other one. So in this case, we'll put in is equal sign H lookup, open a bracket. The first thing is the lookup value, which in this case is 167. I'll put a comma, The next argument is the table array. So I will highlight the whole table and make sure I anchor. We have explained why we need to anchor. So to anchor on Excel, you can press the F4 function key. So I'll do that once, and then come here to the end of the array, do that again, and put a comma. The next argument is which row I want Excel to pick, and in this case it's the commission, so it's 2. So I'll put in 2, and then comma. I want an approximate match in this case, and therefore I'll put 1. Close the bracket. Once I've closed the bracket and entered and pressed enter, I have my commission. Then remember we said because of anchoring, we don't need to do this again. All we need to do is copy this down. So what I'll do is Control C, then highlight where I want the formula copied and enter. And as you can see, I have the commissions for each of the salespeople. So this is VLOOKUP. So then we can now proceed on to VLOOKUP. Up until that point, I hope there are no questions, or are there any questions up to that point? Okay, no questions, we proceed. Okay, so the next thing we'll do is VLOOKUP. So like I said, the lookup functions do basically the same thing, but for VLOOKUP now, it's for data that moves vertically, right? So in this case, we have a table here, an example, a table here. We have months, month numbers, and occupancy rates. So here we are assuming that we're assuming maybe it's a hotel or something like that, and we have the occupancy rates for different months of the year. Then further to that, we have another piece of data here where we're calling it the model timeline. So for example, we're trying to forecast what the occupancy rate for this hotel is over a period of time, say from 2020 all the way, if I move across all the way to the end, it's up to 2025. So it's different periods of time, it's monthly. I want the occupancy rates for all these times. So for that, I'm going to use VLOOKUP. So based on this table here that we've been given, we want to get the occupancy rate for the different periods of time. So first, we need the month numbers. We need to get the month numbers. So as you can see, the first one has been done for us. So we're just going to go through that and see how to put in the arguments based on our example. So again, I'm going to open this formula. It says that you do that by pressing the F2 function key. Done that, and we can come here to the formula bar, put our cursor there so that we know what is happening with the function, like what are the arguments for the function. So in this case, VLOOKUP, the first argument that it needs is the lookup value. So we've said that we are trying to put in occupancy rates for different periods of time based on the month. So for that, when we want to just get the month, what we're going to do is, because we have a date here, so we just want to pick out the month. So we're going to use another function called month to pick out the month from this date here, which in our first example is 31st January of 2020. But our occupancy rates are based on months. So for that, we just need the month, not the whole date. So when we're doing lookup value, we want the month of that date. And therefore, we have here month of J44. That is our lookup value. Then we proceed to the next argument, which is the table array. So in this case, our table array runs from F31 all the way to G42, which is either the month number or the occupancy rate. So, so for that, we're also anchoring. We said this is very important, especially when you want to copy the formula to other cells. And then after that, the next thing that they ask is for the column index number. So you remember for each lookup, it was the row index number. Because now our data is moving vertically on the table, we want to specify to Excel what column to get this information from. And in this case, we want the month number. That's what we are calculating in this particular cell. The month number is the first column of our table array, and therefore we have put 1. After that, you can close the bracket and press enter, and therefore you have your month number. So just as we had done before, we're going to put in this formula again with the specific arguments, but now for the in column in cell K45 to see whether we will get the right month number. So for that case, I'll input the formula myself. I'll say is equals to VLOOKUP, open a bracket. My lookup value is the month of the date, so I'm going to write in month, open the bracket, choose the date, which in this case is 29th February 2020, close the bracket. So for Excel functions, it is very important to always know, to always close the bracket on a function to indicate the end of that function. And it's always important to separate arguments using a comma, which is why you hear me reiterating about closing brackets and putting in commas. Okay. So we can continue. I've put up the lookup value. Then after that, I do a comma. The next thing is to put in the table array. So I will highlight my table array, which in this case is F31 to G42. Make sure to anchor always. So I'll anchor that, say F4, say F4, F4, and do that again also for the end of the array. Then after that, end of arguments, so comma, and then the model, the column index number in this case is the first one. So I'm going to put in 1 and close the bracket. And as you can see, it returns 2, which is the right column, which is the right month number. So I will copy this formula across my data set. So what I'll do is Control C on the formula, then Control Shift right arrow to highlight everything all the way up to the end, and press enter to put in the formulas, to copy the formula. And as you can see, if I move across the time period here, we have the right month numbers going all the way to 2025. Okay, so with that, we can come now to the next thing. Here it's still VLOOKUP, but for this in this case we're looking for the occupancy rate and not the month number. So I'll open the formula again. It's pretty much the same thing. Lookup value, we're looking at the date and we wanted to return just the month. Then after that we have the table array, which is the same, but you see the difference here is that we want Excel to pick the second column in the table array, which in this case is the occupancy rate. So we've done that as well. We can just do the formula again. Is equals to VLOOKUP, open bracket. We're looking at the month of the specific date here, close that bracket, put your comma, highlight the table array that we want the value to come from, make sure to anchor it, put the column. In this case, we are picking the second column index number, and close the bracket and enter. As you can see, it has given us 50%. We'll do the same thing again, copy the formula across. That's Control C, then Control Shift right arrow to highlight all the way to the end, enter to copy the formula to all the cells. And as you can see, we have occupancy rates all the way to 2025. Okay, so that is it for VLOOKUP. Any questions? Any questions up to that point? Okay, no questions, we can proceed. This is fantastic. So the next function that we will look at is the index function. So what does the index function do? So the index function will return a value in a specific position, will return a value from a specific position in a given array. So what is the difference between the lookup values and the index function? The lookup functions and the index function, in this case, it doesn't matter how the data moves. It doesn't have to be specifically horizontal or horizontal as is with HLOOKUP, or vertical as is with the VLOOKUP. For index, the data can move in any direction or can be in any place in the array. But now, because of that, index function works best when used with another function. So this other function is basically used to specify, it's used to specify what exactly happens. Okay, I think there's a question. Let's just look at that. It says, how come you do not need to input true or false value for VLOOKUP? Or you can, actually. This is a question from David Lusa. Let's just go back to VLOOKUP for that. So what Excel does, if I come here and open the formula and bring my cursor here, you can see that for the lookup value, table, array, column, index, they're just written, they're not in brackets. But for the range lookup, it's been put in square brackets. That means that it's optional. You don't have to put in that argument to put in for the function to work. So it's optional. So in this case, we decided to do without it. But for the purposes of the question, we can add that and see how that works, right? So what I'll do is I'll put a comma after my column index number, and I say I want an approximate match. So I'll put 1, right? And enter. As you can see, it has not changed the option. It has not changed the answer that I'm given eventually because of the nature of my table array. And if I copy that across all the way, it's still the same. So the true or false part, or the true or false part of the function is optional, which is why we have it's optional, but once you put it in, as you can see, it does not make a difference. So this depends on the nature of your data and your preference as the person using it. I hope that has been answered. Okay, then we can move on to the index function. Okay, good. Okay, then I can move on to the index function. So yes, so where were we? On the index function, we said that it does basically the same thing the lookup functions do, but in this case, there's no specificity in how the data should move. It can be anywhere on the array. And for that matter, to specify which type of, like where you want Excel to pick that data from, or which value you want Excel to pick, it is always good to use index with another function. So in today's examples, we've done it 2 ways. We have used index with the month function, and then we'll use it with the match function. Yeah. So let's get into that. So the first example, we're using another, say, hotel example. We have the model timeline, the occupancy rate. Okay. And yes. So we still have the same thing, rates based on occupancy rates based on different months of the year, and a model timeline for us to get the occupancy rates for. So again, the first one has been done. So we'll just open that up and see. How the formula works. Yeah. So I'll press F2 to open the formula, and then come here to put my cursor so that I see what type of arguments. I mean, what type of arguments we want. So in this case, we're using the first one, which is array, row, column, and column number, which is optional, as you can see, put in the square brackets. So for this one, first thing we put in is the array, and in this case, we're looking for occupancy rate. So our array in this case is F54 all the way to F65. And then the next thing we want to do is that we want to specify like what type of data exactly. Like what is the basis, what is the criteria for the data that we want the index function to give us. So in this case, we're saying, look at the month of the date here and give me the occupancy rate for that. And therefore, we've done a month function and done that and gotten the month of the specific date. And for that, this column number is optional, so we did not use it. And then close the bracket to get 40%, which here, 31st January, the month is January, and this is 40%. So we're going to put that formula in again and see how that works out. So I'll put in is equal sign, index, open the bracket, put in the table array, which in this case is F54 to F65. What's it called? Anchor it because you want to copy this across. Then after that, I can put the next argument, which in this case is the month in this specific date, which is in K66. Close the bracket for the month function, close the bracket for the index function, and enter. So if we go back to our table, February is 40%, and that is what it has given us. So the function is working fine. So we can copy that across by doing Control-C, Control-Shift, right arrow, a shortcut to highlight everything, and then enter to put in the formula. And if we just look right here, this is 30th of September 2024. The occupancy rate I've been given is 0. And if I come back to my table, occupancy rate for September is 0. So that is fine. So that works fine. So this is when you use the index function with the month function. But now we want to use it with something else. So for this case, we will do index function with a match function. So here we have an example of a data set. We have the item ID, the number of units, the price per unit, and the sales made. So this would be your typical data set. Then to use the index function, now we'd want specific details based on what we are looking for. Say maybe it's an LPO or a consignment note that when we need to get the specific price or the units that have been sold on that. So we need to exalt pick it from the data set. So in this case now, this is where we will use the index function. So the first one has been done. So we'll just open that up, see how it works, and yeah, just look at the arguments. So I'll open the formula, which is open using F2, and then bring my cursor here so that we can look at the arguments. Again, we are using the array, row, column arguments. So the first thing in this, so what are we looking for in this particular one? We're looking for the price based on the item ID. So the array in this case would be the price, because that's what we're looking for. So you can see it's been highlighted. This is K73 to K77, which is the column for the price. And based on that array, we are looking for a specific item with a specific item ID. So what I want Excel to do is match the ID that I've input here based on whatever I'm looking for, and match it to what is on the table in this case. So for that, we'll use the match function. So if I bring my cursor here to where the match function is, we'll see what is the type of lookup, what is the type of arguments that's required to be fed into the match function. And so for the first thing, the first argument is the lookup value. What are we looking to match? And in this case, as you can see, it's J81, which is here, 1, 2, 3, and it is the item ID. So we're saying match this item ID with what is on the table. So the next argument is the lookup array. And in this case, it's the item ID column, which runs from H73 to H77. As you can see, we haven't anchored it, because we're not necessarily copying this formula across or down. In this case, it's just formula in one place. So for that, you don't have to anchor. But if you prefer to anchor as well, well and good. Then the next thing is the match type, which in this case, we want it to be the exact match because it's an item ID. This is a primary key in a data set. See, IDs are specific to certain items. So we want it to be an exact match. And in this case, we've used 0. As you can see in the arguments, it's in square brackets, which means that it's not necessary. It's not, it is necessary, but it's not compulsory to put it in. But in our case, we do want it to match exactly, and therefore we will put 0 for exact match. And then close the bracket on the match, close the bracket on index, and it should give you the right price for item 1, 2, 3, which in the table is 750, and that is what we have here. So we'll just do the same thing now, but we want to find the specific units. So we'll put in the index function again. So we'll start is equals to index, open the bracket, open bracket. The first thing we're looking for is the first thing we're looking in this case, we're looking for the units. So we're going to put in the array for the units, which in this case is it's J73 all the way down to J77. And remember, we just want to anchor that. So we're going to do this in case we need to copy it anywhere. So anchor with F4, again anchor with F4, and then so we're done with that argument, so put your comma. The next thing we want to do is specify what type of data we want, and in this case we want to match the item ID that we have in our form here to what we have on the table. So what we're going to do is put in the match function, open, so I'll put in match, open bracket. We are looking up the specific item ID here, and we want you to look it up in this table array right there. And then we said that we want to do an exact match. So we'll put in 0 and close the bracket. Sorry. So you see, I have not closed all the brackets on the functions, and because of that, Excel has given me an error message. Therefore, this is why it's important to always close brackets on all your functions. Yeah, and if we look at what we have here now, it's given me 67. Go back to my table. For item 123, the units are 67, so this is correct. Let's see how flexible our formulas are. Maybe now I don't want item 1, 2, 3, I want item 4, 5, 6. So I'm just going to put in the item ID 4, 5, 6, enter, and it should automatically change. So here we have the new price and the new units. And so you can do that for all of them. Yeah. So that is index function. Do we have any questions up to that point? Okay, so if there are no questions up to this point, we can move forward. So the next function that we were looking at is concatenate. So basically, what we're saying is that Excel, most of the data type used in Excel is numerical data, but that does not mean that Excel cannot handle other types of data. So it also has text functions, and this concatenate is one of those text functions that is specific to text data types. So in this case, what concatenate does basically is joins two or more strings of text. So there are different texts in different cells, and you want them all in one place. Instead of having to type it out all over again or control copy all the time, you just use this function. Yes, and so for that, you use concatenate. So here you can see I've put concatenate or concat. So what they do is it's basically the same thing, but older versions of Excel has concatenate and the newer versions has concat. So both are functioning for now for continuity purposes, but moving forward, we'll just be using concat. So with that, you can just look at what has been done here for the first one. So we can open the formula for that and see and put our cursor here to see what the arguments are. So basically, the only thing you need to feed into this concat function is the different types of text that you want to use, that you want to combine in this case, which that has been done, and you can see that is what has come out. So as you can see here, for the first, middle, and last name, there's no spaces in between. And maybe for what you're doing, you want it to look presentable, or you want it to look a bit better, so you want to have spaces in between. So we can do that. We can just do that. So let's see how to do it. So I'll just put in the formula here again. So this is equals to equal sign concat, open the bracket. What do you want to do? So we want to get the first name, then after the first name, we want to put a space. So for functions, they look for specific types of arguments, which is why they're always specified. And if you don't have the right amount of arguments in a function, then the function does not work, right? So, but what happens when we want to add arguments into the function that Excel doesn't necessarily require us to do? What do we do in this case? So in such a case, what we do is that we put these other arguments in quotation marks, so that Excel knows this is not a function, this is not an argument that I am supposed to calculate, but rather it is something that is specific to the user. So in our case, we said that we want to put spaces between the first and middle name. So for that, I'll put a space, but I just can't put a space just like that in a function. I have to put it in quotation marks. So for that, I'll open a quotation mark, then put a space that I want to be between the two words, and then after that, close the quotation mark. And that now is an argument of its own. So I'll put a comma. Then I'll get the next text string, which in this case is G95, and then I will put a comma for the end of that argument. Then say between the middle name and the last name, I don't want a space now, I want a hyphen, right? So we'll do the same thing as the space. Always make sure to put non-functional arguments in quotation marks. So I'll open quotation mark, I'll put the hyphen in, and then I will close quotation marks. Then the next thing I want to put in is the last name. So for that, close my bracket on the function and enter. And as you can see, the first name, the second name, hyphen, and then the last name. So that is concatenate. So we can just copy that down so that it does the same for all the rest. And as you can see, that has happened. Yeah, so that's all for concatenate. It's pretty straightforward, very easy to use, and very useful when handling text data types. Do we have any questions up to this point? Okay, so with that, I think we can move on to our last function for today, which is the dated if. So dated if is a function for dates, specifically, and it calculates the number, it calculates a duration between two dates. And it does that in three ways. It does that in years, it does that in months, and it does that in days. So this first one has been done that. What you can do is that we can just open the function to see what is happening. So open the function, and what we'll see is that if I bring my cursor here, you can see that we have dated if, but it doesn't specify what exactly the arguments are. So this is this means that it's not a conventional Excel function, but it is something that is useful. So it is something that you can still use, but it's not conventional to Excel, which is why now it's important to note down these arguments, because Excel will not remind you going forward. But at the same time, it's something that you can use all the time. So because of this, so we're just going to get into it, and I'll just let you know what argument is what. So in this case, we have a table here that has the names of, say, employees, the start date on when they started in an organization, and the end date of that space, or when they left the organization. Then we want to calculate how long they've been there in years, then in months, then in days. This does not mean that this person has been there for 31 years, 300, no, a combination of the three, no. It means in years has been there for 31 years, in months they've been there for 381 months, and for days they've been there for 11,597 days. So it does it like individually, it does not combine. So if we come here and I'll show you what exactly the arguments are. So for dated if, the first argument is always the start date, like the earlier date for this, for what you want to calculate. The earlier date is the first argument. The second thing you put in is the end date, or the latest date in this case. And then the last thing that you put in is that you specify what exactly you're calculating. Are you calculating years? Are you calculating months? Are you calculating dates? And in this particular column, we are calculating years, and therefore we've put Y in quotations to specify that it should calculate the years between the two dates. And for that, press enter and it gives you that. So we're just going to put in the same formula for the next person to see how that works. So is equal sign, dated if, open the bracket. We've said the first function, the first argument is the start date, comma, end date, comma, and we want to specify years. So put Y in quotation marks, close the bracket, and that works. We can copy that down and then do the same for the months. So is equal sign, dated if, open the bracket, and open the bracket, put in the start date for the first thing, for the first argument, put in the end date for the next argument. Here we want to calculate months, so put M in quotation marks, in quotation marks, close the bracket, that's done. Then we can do the same here, dated if, open bracket, start date, end date, and in this case we are doing, date, so we're doing days, so then copy that down, and we have our durations. So there are no questions up to that point. We can now move on to shortcuts and formulas. So we'll be very quick with this, in the interest of time. So no questions up to this point. Okay, good. So we can start with shortcuts. So for shortcuts, remember, as we said that there are two types. There are the control shortcuts and the alt shortcuts. So we'll go through that very fast. So the first thing we're going to do here is that you can see based on the question here for the index question, the example we used for index here, we're going to just use the same one to illustrate. So we have the sales that have been linked to this calculation here. So how do we link to more cells? How do you link to more sheets? Basically what you do is just come to where you want. So if, for example, I want my sales to be in cell G13. I'll just come there, press an equal sign, go to where the sales are on this other sheet, and press on that. You can see on the formula bar, it's already specified that what I want in my new sheet is coming from the formulas and functions sheet, and it is specifically cell L73. I press enter, that has come onto there, and if I copy it down, it will give me the same thing. So that is linking sheets. So then after that, we have some cost of sales per item, and from there we calculate the profit margin. So that's all that we've done for the purposes of this example. So maybe now I want to take these profit margins onto my report or something like that. If I just come here and I say Control C, which is the shortcut for copying, then I come here to this cell here and I want to copy it there, and I do Control V, it gives me an error. Why is that? Because if I open this, it's a formula. What I have copied from here, it is the result of a formula. And when I copy it all the way here, I copy the same formula and not just the profit margin. So how do we change that? Usually what you would do is that you'd come here and say Control Copy, then go to your home button, paste. You just want to paste value, so you paste the value there. So here, copy, come to where you want to paste it, say home, paste value, which is a lot, especially if you are if you're doing it for so much data. So what you do instead of doing that, we'll use the Alt shortcuts. So what are the Alt shortcuts? So basically, when you press Alt on your keyboard and you look at your menu bar, you can see that there are small yellow boxes that are attached to every tab or every function. So when I press Alt, there's F here for file, H for home, N for insert, N for insert, and so on and so forth. And then if I press F again, you can see that. Let's do that again. Alt, and then I pressed F. When I press Alt and then I press H, let's see, just for visibility purposes, you can see that now the yellow boxes have moved from the tabs up here, and now they've assigned themselves to each and every one of the different buttons that you can press here. And say in this case, I wanted to V, so I wanted to paste, so this is specifically to V, and so on and so forth. And if you needed to merge, it's M, and things like that. So when you memorize, when you're doing the same combination of keys over and over again, when you're doing the same thing over and over again, then you can memorize the combination of keys, and instead of going all the way to the menu bar, looking for your cursor, getting it there, coming up with what exactly you need, you just need to memorize these Alt keys. So for example, in our case, we want to copy this 58% margin onto this cell without leaving our keyboard. So what I'll do is that I'll press Control C to copy, move my cell to the way I wanted to copy it, and then I'll press Alt H V V. And as you can see, it has copied it, not the formula, but as a value. And you can do the same for all of them. Come here, Alt HVP, and you can see it's already been done. This means that the formatting is different. That is lesson for another day. But yes, so that is the difference between control shortcuts and Alt shortcuts. So for Alt shortcuts, you just need to memorize what it is that you're doing, the different letters that are specific to your combination of keys, and memorize that for ease. So you don't have to memorize everything, just what you need to do at that point. So after that, after Control and Alt shortcuts, the next thing we're going to look at is watch windows. Now, watch window is basically what it is. It's a window that you use to see cells from another part of your workbook as you make changes. So like in our example here, our sales and everything that feeds into sales is in this sheet. It's in sheets, formulas, and functions. And our profit margin is here in this shortcut and macros sheet. So what if I want to, this negative profit margin here, that's negative 18%, I want to make it positive. And to make it positive, I need to change either the units, or I need to increase my sales, so I need to change the units or the price or something like that. So what I want to do, so I can't come here. What I can do is I can come here, change the units, say change units to 15, then come back here, look whether that has changed the profit margin. So instead of navigating between the two sheets, what you can do is use a watch window. How do we do that? We'll come here to, we go to formulas, the tab formulas, and to the right, there's icon here that says watch window. Press on that. Then from the watch window, we add what exactly it is that we want to watch. So here I'm just going to delete what's there so that we can do it together. So what do I want to watch? I want to watch the profit margins for these specific items as I change the units so that I know when exactly I hit positive profit margin. So I'll highlight, so I'll say add watch, and then I'll come and I'll highlight the profit margin, which is what I want to watch as I change the others. And then after that, I'll add, so you can see it's here in my watch window. So with that, I can go back to my where my units and prices are, just move this to the side so I can see everything properly, and then I'll play around with the units and the prices until I get, say, 30% profit margin. So let me try and reduce the price probably to 200. I'll do that. I still have negative margin. I'll try and increase the units maybe to 50, and I have 48. So that's in the range that I wanted. Then so now I know when making a decision or making an assumption, I need to get at least 50 units to have a positive profit margin. So this is more of a auditing tool. You can also look, once you've already created your model or you created your data set and everything that goes with it, you just know what you need to change so that you get the desired output. So that's how a watch window works, and you can always have it with you. You don't have to minimize it, or you can if you do want. If it's something that you want always on the side, you can just move it, and there it's like permanently stuck there as you do what you need to do. Okay, so are we okay up to there, so that we can move on to the next and last thing? Okay, no question. We move. The other thing we can do when it comes to auditing or looking through something, a data set, is a goal seek function, which is basically like a watch window, but instead of you changing the units and the prices, Excel does it for you. You just tell it what you want and it does it for you. So here we have an example here, and for this last item here, I wanted to have a positive profit margin of 30%, say. And with that, I know that the price, this 20 is a market price, so I can change that. So the only thing I can change is the number of units that I sell. So I want to see how many units I need to sell to get exactly 30% profit margin. So for that, I'll use a goal seek function. And where is the goal seek function on Excel? It is in the data tab, so come to data and come down to what if analysis, and there you can see goal seek. So for goal seek, there are three things that you need. One, the set cell, like which cell am I changing, which in this case is the profit margin for this specific item. And what do I want to set it to? Set 30%, so I'll write 30% in that cell. And by changing what? So we said in this case, the only thing we can change is the units that we are selling. So for that matter, I'll choose the units and then say okay. So once I've done okay, you can see that Excel works out what I need, and they've said that they can get me to 30%, but they can get me to 29.99, which is the same thing. And for that, they've increased my units to 371. So now when making a decision or making an assumption, I know that to get to 30%, I need to be able to sell over 371 units of this item. And so without my guessing, so you can imagine if I was to guess, I'd move from 50 to 20 to 70 all the way, but now this just makes it faster. And then, so if I press OK, this will be permanently changed, but if I press cancel, I can always go back to my original. So what I'll do now is just press cancel to go back to my original, which was 120 in this case. So that is how you use goal seek. Do you have any questions up to there? No, so we will quickly go through the last thing, which was macros and how to record them. So we said macros are programming code that runs in Excel to what's it called? To make your to automate some of your routine tasks. So for example, say in this data set that I have here, both for these two examples I have here, I have headings that just they don't look any different from the other headings. But so what I want to do with all headings is that as I'm typing it, I don't want to concentrate on boldening or underlining, but once I'm done, I just want to highlight all of it and then bolden and underline. And I don't have to want to do that for everything. Maybe this is just a short data set, but what if it's just like a really large database? So what do I do in that case? So in that case, I can automate the boldening and the underlining. So with that, I can record a macro, assign a shortcut to it, and continue from there. So now to record macros, first things first, you need to have your developer tab active. So developer tab on Excel, usually unless you activate it or like you make sure that it is on, it usually isn't. So what we're going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is just show you, in case your developer tab is not active, how to do that. So basically what you'll do is that you'll come here to File and scroll all the way down to Options. Once you've done that, you go to Customize Ribbon, and where here to the right, where you have the developer tab, make sure the box is checked. That means that you will have this tab active. Then after that, you will press OK, and it should appear. For mine, it's already there, so that does not change anything. So then what you can do now, the next thing to do is to record macros. So what you'll do is that, so first, if I come here to macros, I'll get a dialog window here that shows all the macros active in a specific workbook. Now, for my workbook here currently, I don't have any macros on, so it does not show anything. But ideally, for say a fast financial model, you will have a list of macros that are specific to the fast standard, and those automate some routine tasks that are done in the fast standard. So for example, for the first standard, it is required that all inputs be shaded yellow. So instead of having to do that all the time, that is already automated for you using a macro and that is pre-recorded and that you can install in your machine. For more information on this, you can go onto our platform, which is learn.investia.com, and it has all the information you need on the fast standard, on how to install macros, where to download them, and all the information that comes with that. So for now today, I'll just show you how to record a simple macro. But for the fast macros, they're already pre-done and pre-recorded. All you need to do is download and install them. Okay, so just press cancel on that, and then now come here to record macro. So now when I press on record macro, it means that anything I do after pressing record macro is what essentially Excel will replicate when I do the shortcut. Okay, so from there here, I'll come here and I'll say record macro. So first of all, you need to give your macro a name. So in our case, we'll just call it macro 1. And give it a description in case someone is going through the macros and trying to see what it does. So for our case, we want to bolden and underline a heading. So we'll say bolden and underline a heading. Right? So with that, now we have, then the next thing you need to do, which is most important actually, is assign a shortcut key. So automatically, your most shortcut keys start with control, right? So control, and you can choose a letter of your choosing, right? So in my case, maybe it can just be control W. So I'll just write W right there. Yeah, you can do that. and then say OK. So now at this point, Excel has started recording. You can see that through, if you come here to the tab, you can see it says recording, stop recording, which means it's already recording. And if I come down here and press on this white box, it says a macro is currently recording, click to stop recording. It means that anything I do on Excel now, it will be recorded as that specific macro. So what did I want to do? I wanted to bolden and underline. So I come here to my home tab, press the bolden, B for bolden, and U for underline. And once that is what I want Excel to do every time I press Control W. So just with that, without doing anything else, I'll come back either to the developer tab and press stop record, or just come down here and press stop record, whichever works for you. So now I've stopped, pressed record, and that should be done. So now we're going to see whether this macro works or whether we need to run it. So I'll come here to my keyboard, and I want cost of sales to be boldened and underlined. So what I'll do is I'll do Control W, and as you can see, it has worked. That means I don't have to go physically to home, bolden, underline. No, just go anywhere, press Control W, done again. I can go down here, see whether that works, Control W, done. Let's highlight more and see whether that works again, Control W, done. So this is just a simple macro that we have recorded, and depending on how you use Excel and what type of data you use and what are the specifications, you can always record macros accordingly. So with that done, I just, is there any question up to this point? Any questions up to this point? Okay, so with that, then I guess it is the end of our webinar session for today. Thank you very much for joining. I hope it has been educative and informative, and please make sure to please make sure to fill in the feedback forms that will be sent to you as per your registration, so that we can know what else you want done on this webinar. And with that, I wish you a good evening and a great weekend ahead. Thank you. And one last thing, remember about the macros that we've spoken about, the list of control shortcuts and alt shortcuts. All this can be found on our platform, learn.investia.com. You can go through the FM 100 course, which is the introduction to financial modeling and also gives an introduction to Excel. You can find where to download the shortcuts, a list of the shortcuts, so that you know what is specific to you and how to use it. It has the macros, the fast macros, which you can download and install into your machines and use going forward. And lastly, there's also for people who do forecasting and have to create timelines for their models, we have an FMR 100 course that shows you how to come up with a timesheet for your model. And with that, if we have no further questions, comments, or additions, we can end our session. Once again, thank you very much for joining. Have a lovely evening.